By request of the meeting organizer, this meeting is being recorded.
To the New York State Council on the Arts webinar for the Architecture and Design Program's Independent Projects category. This is for funding for projects that will occur between January 1st, 2018 and December 31st, 2018. Is this the right meeting for you? It is if you are a professional in the field of architecture, landscape architecture, historic preservation, fashion design, graphic design, industrial design, interior design, and you have a project which you believe will advance your field, is innovative, promotes design excellence, and can contribute to a broader understanding of design. I'm Kristen Herron. I am the Program Director for Architecture and Design here at NYSCA. And NYSCA has been a proud supporter of projects to individuals in the design fields for 30 years. This slide just shows some images of projects in different fields from those past 30 years. If you're interested in learning more about those projects which have been funded in the past, we do have an animated timeline on YouTube. It shows the first 25 years of the program from 1987 to 2012. It was completed by a fantastic intern who is a graphic designer, Maria Urus. You can see the YouTube link down below, or just go to YouTube and type in NYSCA's 25 years of independent projects. The animated timeline will take you through those 25 years, and there'll be a few pop-outs, as you see highlighted here, of selected projects throughout the years. And that is exactly where I want to start us today, with some examples of funded projects to give you a sense of what the New York State Council on the Arts can support or may support in the fields that I've described before. First example comes from Frampton Tolbert. His project was 25 years of mid-century design, also known as Queens Modern. There's a website, queensmodern.com, you can go have a look at. Frampton's project focused on surveying and documenting about 400 buildings and their architects in Queens. They were focused on the annual Building Awards recipients from 1945 to 1970, and this website now helps illuminate how buildings in Queens contributed to trends in mid-century architecture. It's a very thorough research project that you can access now. Material study is another area that we sometimes receive requests in, and Rhett Russo was funded for a project called Soundscape, Architectural Acoustical Ceramics. I'm not actually going to read the text here, which is in his words. In my layman's terms, this was a project that looked at ceramic panels, aesthetically pleasing ceramic panels, and how those impacted the audio experience of a space. So he asks, we'll point the question, how does the morphology of sintered ceramic affect sound? We've recently funded Iona Teokaropoulou for her book, Builders, Housewives, and the Construction of Modern Athens, which will be coming out this year in 2017. It's the first book reassessing the explosive growth of post-war Athens and its most distinctive building type. This project I use as an example, not only because we fund a number of book projects. They're a very obvious way to serve a public by having a book that advances some idea in a relevant design field. But I also highlight this because often I get a question about whether the project has to be New York State focused. So a book project may tackle an architectural topic that is not native to New York State. And as long as that applicant makes the case that the creation of this book and its access out in the world expands their field, in this case architectural history, this is perfectly appropriate. Now, if this were a project to design and build something in Greece or to work in a lab in Greece, that would not be fundable. So the work has to take place in New York State, but the topic of, say, a book or an exhibition might be more global And those that are successful really make the case that they advance some element of their field. They share information that's not known. They contribute to a broader discussion. Jin Young Song was funded for ZEAF, Zero Energy Adaptive Facade. This is a prototyping project by the architect to develop a facade which imitates the leaves of a tree. And it's a marriage of artistry and sustainability, integrating photochemically responsive polymer sheets folded into an origami-inspired pattern, which then diffuses natural light. And some of what makes this a compelling project for an arts council is this great marriage of ultimately, again, layman's terms, science and art. There's a real aesthetic play to this that was very compelling, but it's also seeking to solve an issue in a field or provide a new material to use in building design and to link the issues of daylighting and aesthetic approaches to integrating light into a building. And Darling Opo, Building Bridges for the Arts. As I mentioned previously, we fund a number of design fields. Those include fashion, and this project, Building Bridges for the Arts, was a community-based design project by a fashion designer which promoted professional career advancement in fashion design for at-risk high school students. So youth from low-income neighborhoods were learned through hands-on projects, through lectures, discussions, critiques. They learned the process of research, concept design, garment construction and development, and created a three-piece collection, which was publicly exhibited at the Bronx Museum of the Arts. We received many fewer requests in the fields of fashion design, graphic design, industrial or interior design, but they are absolutely welcome to this program if they are tackling an issue and solving a problem or helping a field move forward. Community-based design is something that we have funded. Individual projects that seek to connect the community with a design issue is definitely something that can be supported in this category. It also reflects priorities of the program to encourage design literacy for all New Yorkers. So are you eligible to apply? This comes straight from our guidelines, which you can find at the NYSCA website, www.arts.ny.gov. That's www.arts.ny.gov. You click on Guidelines, Architecture and Design, and a very large document will pop up, which includes a lot of screenshots about submitting the application, which you as an individual will not be responsible for submitting online. But if you scroll down, our guidelines start on page 46, and you keep scrolling and you will find the information for independent projects. Back to eligibility. An individual or a small team must be a professional in architecture, landscape architecture, historic preservation, graphics, fashion, industrial, or interior design. If you are a historian in one of those fields, you qualify. That also means if you're a critic in one of those fields, if you're a journalist, you can also qualify because you are a professional in those fields. Unfortunately, visual artists whose work references the built environment or a design element are not eligible for support in this category. The project itself must emphasize design and reflect one or more of those fields cited above. The category cannot support past work, nor can it support current or client commissioned work. It's intended to support new ideas and explorations which further the evolution of a relevant design field, and that it's self-generated by you or your team. An individual may only be associated with one project request per year. If you appear on more than one request, both will be deemed ineligible for support. This is really important to state again. If you are coming in for a project and then you are part of a team of another project and you both submit an application, both of those requests will be cancel each other out and will be deemed ineligible. If you have any questions about this rule, by all means you can be in touch with me. My contact information will appear at the end of this webinar. This is a highly competitive category. Every request is against the other requests in the category, and therefore we only accept one per person. Continuing on with eligibility, if you are faculty in an architecture or design school, you are welcome to apply. However, your project must not be part of course curriculum. This can't be what your graduate studio is going to work on next, in the following semester. It has to be something different from that. If you are a research-based studio, you may be eligible to apply if you can make the case that this is not related to university curriculum. Sometimes folks will ask if they can hire a graduate student as part of the project, as long as that student is not receiving course credit for it and they're just a part-time assistant on your project and they happen to be a graduate student, that's fine. Again, it can't relate to any required university coursework that is, or contribute towards one's degree. If it's a paid internship that is part of a requirement for a degree, that's not eligible because we can't fund student projects. This is a NYSCA-wide mandate. This is not unique to this program. And then related to students, if a currently matriculated student wishes to apply, they are allowed to do that. But you must be very clear in your application that your project is in no way related to your degree. It's not fulfilling coursework. It's not considered an internship. It has to be, it's not your master's thesis, your PhD dissertation. It has to be completely separate from your coursework. Extremely critical. Whoever is listed as the lead on this project, whether it's an individual or a small team, those lead applicants must provide as evidence that they are current residents of New York State. We are the New York State Council on the Arts. We are funded through public tax dollars, and therefore we can only fund individuals who are residents of New York State. Now, how do you prove you're a resident? This information is all in our guidelines. In brief, this requires 2 forms of documents per individual that is recent. And what we need to know is that you're currently a resident in 2017 when you're applying, and you're going to be a resident in 2018. Sometimes I have to follow up with individuals, and I do if necessary, but the types of documents will include things like a driver's license if it's been recently issued. It could include your mortgage, a mortgage document if you are a homeowner. It could be your rental agreement. It could be your copy of your tax forms. Personal information redacted. I don't have no interest in your money, in your account. I simply want to see your name and your address. I want both documents that you submit to show the same name and the same addresses, and that address cannot be your place of work. It needs to be your residence. So if you live in New Jersey but you work in Manhattan, you can't apply for this award. Also critical, any NYSCA funds cannot be used for out-of-state travel expenses. If your project requires out-of-state travel, that is fine as long as you make it very clear that you are not seeking funds from the New York State Council on the Arts to pay for that out-of-state travel. Again, this is an agency-wide requirement. We cannot fund out-of-state travel. Sponsoring organizations are organizations that allow you to apply. So individuals or teams cannot directly apply to NYSCA. Only nonprofit organizations can directly apply. We are not allowed to make direct grants to individuals. So a sponsoring organization will work with you to submit your application to NYSCA, and if you are successful, they will receive the funds and then provide them to you. So we always encourage a sponsoring organization should work with the individuals, meaning a part of the application must be completed by the sponsor. They must upload your materials onto our application portal, the Grants Gateway. They must also follow up, if you're successful, with contracting paperwork and a final report. You as an applicant need to provide the content. Sponsors will tell you how they want that sent to them, and I'll give you some more information about sponsors in a minute. But you will be responsible for the content, for the supporting documents, and if you're supported, you will be responsible not only for completing the project, as you state in 2018, but providing the information necessary for your sponsor to submit a final report. Should you not submit a final report, I will work with your sponsor on their ability to continue to apply to NYSCA, but any individual who fails to file a final report will not be able to apply in the future. So a sponsoring organization can really be any nonprofit if it is pre-qualified in New York State's Grants Gateway and eligible to apply to the New York State Council on the Arts. You as an individual or a team may work with any sponsoring organization you choose, but I must reinforce that no organization is required to sponsor any individual. It is completely an organization's choice whether or not they wish to do so. There are a few organizations whose mission is directly tied to this category, and so they welcome and support individuals to apply. I'm going to highlight three of them. They are by no means your only choices, but they are three nonprofits that are eligible to apply, for whom this is part of their mission and who have a regular call for individuals to apply through them. They're listed here alphabetically. The first is the Architectural League of New York. The Architectural League welcomes anyone interested in the independent projects category to apply through the League. This year, the League will be sponsoring up to 25 eligible requests. It's going to be based on a first-come, first-served basis. I encourage you, if you're interested in working with the League, to go to their website at archleague.org, archleague.org, archleague.org. You may also contact Frances Leslie. Her email is there, leslie@archleague.org, to receive more information or to be added to their newsletter list. Another choice is Storefront for Art and Architecture. They seek applications for independent projects aligned with their mission to advance innovative and critical ideas that contribute to the design of cities, territories, and public life. Storefront will select 20 projects to be submitted to NYSCA based on an initial project proposal, images and visuals that support the project, and participant or team resumes and background information. You can learn more at their website, storefrontnews.org. And finally, Van Allen Institute again offers an opportunity for architecture, design, and historic preservation professionals to apply for fiscal sponsorship to the New York State Council on the Arts Independent Projects Grant. Van Allen will be accepting applications from February 14th until March 6th, and they will sponsor up to 20 independent projects through this program. They will select which projects they will sponsor based on eligibility, completeness, and alignment with Van Allen's mission. To learn more, you should go to their website at vanallen.org. And I want to note something that the Van Allen post brings up that is relevant to all three. Each of these sponsors and any other sponsor you may wish to work with will establish their own deadlines that will be different than NYSCA. The New York State Council on the Arts deadline for submission of applications is March 21st at 4 p.m. Not 4:01 p.m., but 4 p.m. No applications will be accepted after that date. The sponsors have a lot of administrative work to do to get your application into our system, so they will be establishing earlier deadlines. It is their choice. Van Allen, for example, wants to see applications by March 6th. This is to provide them enough time so that they can make sure they are properly and successfully uploading your materials into our application portal. So those three organizations absolutely will be welcoming individuals. Each of them look for projects that align with their missions. And again, Architectural League, Storefront, and Van Allen Institute, you can check any of their websites to learn more about their deadlines and how to apply through them. But if you think you want to try to find a different sponsor, but you're not sure who, another way to find potential sponsors is to look through NYSCA's past grants. So if you go to arts.ny.gov, which is the NYSCA website, you'll see in the top box, I think it's the third line down, it will say past NYSCA grants. If you click on that, you can search. I encourage you to search by program, architecture and design. A clue as to who has sponsored someone in the past is if you see any awards that are $10,750, those are Independent Projects Awards. So that'll give you a clue of some successful sponsors. Otherwise, you can simply look through the entire list of any nonprofit or search for a specific organization to see if they have typically come into NYSCA and thus are familiar with our process. You can also reach out to a nonprofit who has not previously applied to NYSCA. That is your prerogative. That organization may have a number of extra steps to take in order to submit their required documents to our website and the state's Grants Gateway portal. If you have any questions about sponsors, by all means, contact me and I can help put you in the right direction. I want to talk now about the application narrative, because this is the part that you as an individual will be filling out, and this is how you are making your case to receive support. One of the most basic things I always say about submitting a grant application, and yet I never seem to say it enough because it is a consistent problem, is that you must read the guidelines carefully. So what I've done here is highlight in red some key points to these intro paragraphs. Again, this may seem incredibly obvious, but I cannot stress how many people seem to miss parts of this. So this is for you to creatively explore or research an issue or problem in the fields of architecture, landscape architecture, historic preservation, graphic, fashion, industrial, and/or interior design. Your project needs to advance that field and contribute to a broader understanding of design. We're looking for projects that are innovative in nature, that emphasize artistry and design excellence. Remember, design must be at the core of any project because we are the New York State Council on the Arts. So if your project has a really strong scientific component to it, but at this phase it's much more about science or technology and not the design elements that come with that, it will not likely fare as well as others. And when we talk about advancing the field, what I mean by this is you may have something you've always wished you just had time to sit back and explore, materials development, a research project, a design idea, whatever your project might be that you wish you had time to work on. Being successful with these grants gives you some room to have that time because it provides you the funds to do so. But this isn't just for an individual or a team to be able to explore something they think is cool on their own that will go nowhere but their own studio. This has to be a project that you share with others. This has to be a project that you can articulate has a place in the bigger world. The whole reason this category was started in 1987 was to really encourage architects and designers to continue to push the boundaries of their field and to give them a space in which to do that. I'm going to go over the 5 questions that you're going to have to answer and give you a little bit of information that I hope will help you in preparing your application. The first question is the project overview. We ask you to describe the project, emphasizing the role of design, discuss how this design project will advance and provide a contribution to its field. This is an opportunity for you to really lay out what it is you intend to do, why it's important. Every once in a while someone answers this question with 1 or 2 sentences. 1 or 2 sentences is not enough. You're going to be allowed a couple thousand characters. You may or may not need all of those characters, but you do need to find this balance where you're able to really articulate to the reader what your project is, where the design is, and how this connects to your field. To give you a second opportunity to expand on that is question number 2. It's a question that our peer review panels had asked me to add a few years ago. We call it the project context question, and it's the one that I have to say based on last year was the most, received the weakest answers of any of the questions across the board. Some people answered it successfully, but the majority of applicants weren't really successful in getting across what the panel was looking for. What it reads is this: provide specific context to show how this project builds on similar work in your field, is unique, or tackles an issue or problem in the field in a new way. So think of question one, you get this chance to talk about your project, you emphasize design, you are wrapping up that section with how this project adds to your field, and question two lets you expand on that notion. What we want to know by context is we want to know that you know whether anyone else has explored this idea. Have there been similar design projects that have been successful, that have failed? Is your book a new take on a subject because you're able to say there were all these other publications, but they didn't address this specific element of design history? Panel needs to know that you understand where you fit in the ecosystem of your field. We need to understand how you know that there's a need for what you're doing and that it's different than something that already exists. I say this is weak because people seem to have difficulty providing that context. It requires some research on your part to see what has been out there in the world in the area you're interested in. It's really important, though, because the panel hones in on this to say, to look at how you make the case that you provide this added dimension to your field. And we have a panel that I'll talk about in a little bit that knows a lot about the world of architecture and design. And so the worst case for you is for a panelist to be reading your application saying, I can't believe they didn't talk about X, Y, and Z. These are the obvious sources on this topic, and they haven't even addressed them at all. That means the panel's going to start questioning how well you know what you're exploring and why you're the right person to do it if you don't know the other materials or resources out there on your topic. These questions, I should say, follow NYSCA's primary criteria. The last ones, were the artistic programmatic criteria. That's looking at the content of your project. The next set are managerial fiscal. And you might think, managerial fiscal? Why are you, this is my individual project. What does that have to do with anything? This is all about your ability to get this project done. So we want to know, in number 3, about the project leader team, we want you to narratively highlight the qualifications that show you're the right people to do this project. It's not just that you think this is a really interesting thing to do, it's why are you the right people? Why do you have the skill set above anyone else to take this forward? That's sort of taking your resume or CV, which you'll be uploading, and translating to us in a narrative format, making the case why you have this skill set that you believe is unique to anyone else and why you can take this project forward. The project management question, number 4, is a work plan effectively. You are applying for support for something that can only happen in the year 2018. So we want to know how you're planning to do this. The panel is looking at this to see if you've scheduled not enough time for yourself to do what you say you're going to do. If you're a team, they want to know how you're working together. So we need you to kind of bullet point, is a fine way to do it, who's doing what, and roughly when it's going to happen. If your project, I'm making this up, it will take 3 months, and you can do it at any point during the year. You don't have to specify the month or day, but just say this is a 3-month project, and here's what would happen in those 3 months, which would occur in 2018. If your project is specific to a time of year, then you would note that as well. But again, really remember, you're applying for work that happens in 2018. If you need to reference something that happened in 2017, because it was preparation for your project, you can reference it, but none of these funds can be used for anything happening in 2017, nor can it be used for anything happening forward in 2019. This is a spot where I believe I had 3 applicants last year who somehow did not pay attention to the dates, and they applied for projects that were happening in the year we were not funding. So they were applications that we could not even consider in our process because they were automatically unfundable because they were happening in the wrong year. The last question can be really hard, I find, so I'm going to take a moment on this. It's our service to the public section. The New York State Council on the Arts is a public funder, everything we fund has to have a public dimension to it. So we ask you to define your project's intended audience and how this project will be made accessible to that audience during the contract year. In this case, it's the year 2018. So I want to talk about what I mean by intended audience. Intended audience is who you feel will benefit most from this project. If you are working, say, on materials development, and really it's your peers, say it's other architects that will benefit from this, it is perfectly fine to define this project as one that is really aimed at practicing architects. If you are doing a very nuanced materials study and you say, this is for practicing architects and everybody, the truth is it's probably not for everybody, and that tells us you don't really know who you're serving. So on the other hand, if you're doing a publication that maybe is not an academic publication, is taking a topic and presenting it in a more engaging manner that could be of interest to professionals, but could also be of interest to an audience that is keen on design issues, you can frame that as well. But if you're writing a very academic, theoretical book, in the example I'm giving now, a general audience is not going to be your audience. So that will be very obvious by how you describe the publication and how you talk about it. So again, your audience should be defined. You should not feel like you have to say it's for everyone when it's not. You should really be very clear yourself who will benefit from this and define that to us. Now, making the project accessible to the audience in 2018 sometimes gets a little challenging, and I understand that. Maybe your public dissemination point is an exhibition, or it's a book project, but you're coming in for an early phase of that. You're developing your ideas, you're doing research, and the actual end product won't happen in 2018. So this is where folks will often ask me, how am I supposed to show a public dimension if really I'm just hunkered down in my lab exploring, in my studio exploring ideas, or I'm in a library going through archives. What I ask you to is really think about what, if this is going to have its strongest public dimension outside of the year 2018, you need to really think about what you can do in 2018. Don't just say, I'm going to put it on a website, or I'm going to have an exhibition, because that alone looks like a throwaway line. If you are going to give a lecture, and that's something you're fairly confident about, whether it's at a conference because it's a very focused audience, it's in a more public realm, you can share that. Don't just say I'm going to create a website, but if you already have a website and you are able to market that website to your intended audience, or you're going to do a live Facebook and making it up, whatever you do, you have to share this somehow with an audience of more than yourself in the year 2018. It may not be your ultimate end product. You're working on a book, and maybe it's an article that is going to come out in a journal in 2017, or again, it's a presentation you're going to give. You're going to promote this project in other ways. You can always ask me specifically questions about this, but the bottom line is think really hard about what can I do in the year 2018 to share with other people what I'm doing. If you're working on a project in your studio, do you have open house days? And again, making this up, where you invite your peers or you invite the general public and you promote this to come see the work in progress, which is a really fascinating thing to think about process that people don't always see. You can be very creative. You could do Instagram updates. You could do any number of things, but think very hard about how you can share what you're doing with an audience in 2018. And again, if the real bulk of it's going to happen later, you can tell us that too, but we need to see something in 2018. Supporting materials are a very important part of your application. They'll be sent to your sponsor, and I'm actually going to tell I've told most sponsors, but I will tell all of you, personally, I really want to see the application form you're going to have to fill out and your supporting documents, with one exception, all saved as one single PDF. That would make things really helpful to all of us. You will not be marked down in any way if you don't do it that way, but if you are able to do a single PDF of your application narrative, your, number one, resumes or biographical statements of your individual or team, your images, those together as one would be really helpful. You're allowed to provide up to 15 images or website reference. When I say images, I mean ones, like I have one image up here. I might have 2 photographs in that slide. That still counts as one image. So if it's a PowerPoint, 15 slides, if you will. Could be a website reference. This needs to be representative of recent work, and it's possible of your proposed project. Some folks don't have images related to the project, and that's understood because you're not working on it. But think very carefully about what you show us from your portfolio, because the panel looks at that very carefully. The panel is comprised of practicing architects, of academics, of designers in multiple fields, so they are very knowledgeable. They're going to look carefully at your visual images. And again, if your portfolio is not directly related to this project, it needs to tell us that story of who you are and how you are the right person to do this project. It should demonstrate your design skills, demonstrate why you're the right person to do this, and also make sure you identify what the images are of. Number 3 is the supporting document that I do not need in that single PDF if you're so willing. This is your proof of New York State residency. Please go to our website for the eligibility criteria. I should say that you should go to the, I want to clarify that, you should go to the architecture and design guidelines, and you can find in that document the requirements. I believe each of the sponsors are also making sure you have that direct link. Redact personal information. I just need confirmation of name and address. Again, the name and address have to match. I should not have 2 documents with 2 different addresses on it. These will not be shared with anyone but me and the sponsor. I'm just going to check and make sure that you are indeed a New York State resident. There are optional documents. Number 4 is only if your project is intended for installation in a public space. I know this part gets really challenging, but we can't fund a project that is intended to be installed in a public space in the year 2018 unless we see that you have some sort of documentation that will allow you to do that. This, I know, trips people up that they don't have that proof when they have to apply to NYSCA because it's so far in the future, but it may seem like a chicken egg, but we have to have this because, again, we can't fund a project that you have no permission to actually do, because in the end you'd have to return the money to the state, and that doesn't make anyone happy. So must have documented permission to use a site, only if you're doing an installation in a space, and you'll need to provide that evidence to us. If you try to get around this by saying, hey, I'll just do the installation on my private property, that doesn't make it publicly accessible, so that's a real concern if it's private property, a person's home or a person's own land. Direct questions on that you can ask me. Number 5 is also an option if you are writing for publication, might be a chapter, might be a book. We want to see an outline and up to 5 pages of sample text. If possible, that text should be related to the project. Ultimately, the panel wants to know that you can write in an engaging manner and that your ideas can be expressed well in writing. So to recap, ideally, if it is possible, you're going to submit a single PDF of the application narrative form followed by your resume or bio statement, up to 15 images, or if it's a website reference. That same PDF, if necessary, will include proof of your ability to install your project in a public space, or if it's a publication, an outline in text. That would be a single PDF, and a separate PDF would be your proof of New York State residency, because that I will not forward on to our panel. And again, you are not required to save this all in a single PDF. If you're willing to do that, it really helps our process on this side. So how do you decide who gets funded? So once you submit your application through your sponsor, first I'm going to read it. I'm the only staff in the architecture and design program. It's all me. So, and I'm not a trained architect. I come from the museum field. I have taught in design history programs, so my background is much more in objects and design, a little bit of vernacular architecture. just so you have that quick sense of who I am. I'm going to read your application. I'm going to make sure, first of all, that you meet the basic eligibility requirements, and then I'm going to really analyze these requests, and I'm going to write down any questions I have. I also like to curate our panel meeting because every year, inevitably, there are some themes that come out with projects that tackle similar topics. So I try to group those together because this is a competition for funding. I will then have these applications be made available to peer review panels. We have 7 people. They are architecture and design professionals from all across New York State. Again, as I've mentioned before, some are practicing architects or designers, some are faculty at university and also practicing. Sometimes I will have a design critic or a journalist in the mix. I have folks who can represent the different fields that this program funds as well. They will read your applications. They're going to meet in our offices to evaluate the application, the narrative, the answer to those 5 questions, and the supporting documents based on NYSCA's 3 criteria, and that's, again, the structure of your actual application, so it's all right there for them to see. And I'm going to go over with you how we review this, because sometimes people find that interesting. We can receive over 100 applications in a given year. It really depends. And to handle those applications, our panel reviews them in 2 rounds. Now bear in mind, the panel has looked at your images, your supporting documents, they've read your application before they come to our offices. So they're very well versed in this. We are projecting your images as we bring your request up and anything they want to look at a second time. Round 1, we do a quick discussion for the strengths and weaknesses as based on NYSCA's criteria. Our panel then votes by a show of hands if they want to move a request forward. This requires 4 out of 7 hands to go up, minimum. These are projects that they may or may not think deserve funding, but they think have strong merit or really interesting issues to discuss. They will do this very quickly because we will take 1 day to go through the requests. I am feverishly taking notes, so I will have feedback for every applicant. Some will be more lengthy than others, but everyone will get feedback from this peer review panel. Those requests that go to round 2, and that's usually 25 to 30% of the requests, will now, on day 2, get discussed in much greater detail. The panelists will rate each application in each of our 3 criteria, so you can look back at those questions you have to answer on a 1 to 9 scale, and your application will receive an aggregate score at the end. We take time to look at those scores high to low to make sure that the narrative notes I have match the scores they have come up with, and if for any reason we don't feel that they match, we discuss it again to make sure that we are not being purely bureaucratic, but that your number reflects your score. And then our panel will look at this list and it's what I call drawing the line. We'll draw the line of where they believe the funding should go. I'll be honest, this is usually very obvious. There's usually a very obvious break. Their funding recommendations are made to our council committee, it's our board, and it's not until the full council meet that grants are made. The maximum award is $10,750. $10,000 can be for your project, and $750 goes for the sponsoring organization. But the sponsoring organization only receives support if the application is funded. And we fund very few requests. Typically, it's 10 to 12 projects a year. I think last year we funded 13 at the panel's request. We range from a 10 to 15% success rate. Architects sometimes tell me that's great odds compared to if they're in a competition for to design a building. But here at NYSCA, this is the lowest success rate of any program. It's highly, highly competitive. That's why we have this structured 2-layer process where the panel goes over everything, goes back to make sure they're being fair. I take as copious notes as possible. So I'm stressing to you that what they go by are the answers to the narrative questions and the supporting documents that you provide. It's on you to make the best case for your project. I'm ready for some Q&A, so if anyone has questions, You can ask me those questions by using the chat box. I'm going to read those questions anonymously, so you should not feel that any question is too silly or that I will in any way embarrass you, because I will not identify who you are. So the first question I have, it's from, it's an individual who would like to submit a book project, and they are the editor for this project, so there's going to be a number of individuals contributing to it. And they noted that I reference only their resume or bio as the lead. So what about the folks inside? If you are submitting something like that, you're editing a book, you are very welcome to add brief bios on all your contributors. Brief, just a few sentences would be ideal. We do not, this is not the question this individual asked, but I want to bring this up. I've said before that if an individual is on more than one request, they are automatically knocked out. That is if you are the lead on more than one request. If you are one essayist in a compilation and the editor is the person who is seeking the funding, then that would not knock you out. If you're the editor, then you could not be on any other project because you would be the lead applicant in that case. I hope that answers the question. Other questions are very succinct, very specific. It's about the installation. You have to restate if your project necessitates an installation in the year 2018, the year for which you're being funded. We need some sort of proof that you will be allowed to install your project that year. If you don't have that information before the application is due, it's not going to be a successful application. Just to be honest, we really can't fund projects that are installations if we don't know. And related to that, if your project is an exhibition, we need to know what your venue is. So if you want to provide documentation that a specific venue has confirmed that your exhibition will be able to be held there, you can include that as a supporting document. What I don't need are letters of reference that say how great you are and why your project's important. Those are not part of the process. It's only this documentation for an installation, either an installation in a public space or, as this other example, if you are applying to fund an exhibition. The next question comes from someone who has seen our past funding, which we don't send a press release out, but I can always share the most recently funded projects, and the sponsors often share that. The question is, it seems like you fund a lot of book projects. Do you have a preference for book projects? We don't, actually. It does in some years seem like we fund more book projects, and that may be because it's it's a little more easy and more tangible public dimension component than other projects. So public dimension, as I mentioned, is very critical. So I would encourage you don't have to come in for a book project. Whatever your project is, again, really think about how you can share what you're doing in the year 2018, even if it is a project in progress. Be clever about social media. Be clever about your community. Think creatively about how you can share what you're doing with an audience, even if your project is not completed. This next question, so this person wants to work on a small team, but one of their teammates does not live in New York State. So the leads on these requests can only be from New York State. We can't fund out-of-staters, nothing against them. These are public dollars from New York. I would say that on rare occasion, someone has needed to contract out efforts to someone out of state, a small portion of the project, because they provide a unique skill that no one else in the state has. That would be something you could articulate, but that person could not be part of the official applicant team. I have seen an application in the recent past where the project itself really required the work of a licensed architect. The leads were designers in other fields working with a licensed architect, but the primary efforts of the project were of the licensed architect, and the individual was not licensed in New York State. This was a problem for the request because it begs questions about, there's many licensed architects in New York State. Why is this person from somewhere else being the focus of this request? What do they bring that's unique? But it really felt more like, whether it's true or not, it came across as if New York Staters were applying on behalf of an out-of-stater, so that that situation becomes fraught with issues. So if you have a teammate who's not in New York State and you want to ask me questions, you can, but the bottom line is these are funds for folks who are New York State residents to fulfill projects, and it's not something we can provide for folks who are out of state. And the internet is, a very useful tool, so it's really easy to sort of figure out if we have any questions about where one might be located at any given time. Other questions as we go through this? Someone wants to know, okay, so I described our process of evaluation, and in day one, yes, we can go through 100 applications in one day, but this individual wants to know, how can we really give everyone a fair turn if we go through so many applications? I will tell you, I've been at NYSCA for many years. I have managed this program for over 6. I cannot tell you how incredibly thorough these architects and designers are in a matter of minutes. We really have an incredibly intense day. We launch into each of your requests and just deep into the strengths and weaknesses straight away. I am amazed at the kind of feedback that I can get from them. So it is a very quick review process. I think it's not unlike jury situations elsewhere, but you will get feedback, and I should say that you should absolutely contact me after this process concludes so that you can hear that feedback. And I think, and people should call whether they are supported or they are not supported, because I will have feedback for everyone. I want to reinforce the deadlines because that's important for you to know. I'm going to stress these are NYSCA's deadlines, and as I've stated previously in this webinar, those deadlines may not coincide with your sponsor. Your sponsor sets their own deadlines because they must submit the materials into our grant portal. Sorry for the background noise. And that process can take them some time, particularly if they're entering 20 different applications. So the deadline for New York State Council on the Arts grant is March 21st at 4 p.m. That's the deadline for your sponsoring organization. Your deadline will vary depending on who you are working with, so it will be earlier than that. The decisions will be made in fall of 2017. Our process of internal review, review by peer review panel, and presentation to our council takes place over the ensuing months. I manage 2 different programs. I also manage the museum program, so I'm not devoting 100% of my time to these requests. I have to balance both, so that's why we all here take some time to move forward in our process. Fall is when you'll hear. Again, your project cannot start until the year 2018, so you will definitely hear long before the actual project time can start. I don't see other questions, so if you find that you have further questions, you can absolutely reach out to me. My email address is here, kristen.heron@arts.ny.gov. My direct line is 212-459-8825. I encourage you to email me first, because as the weeks progress, I will be having lots of calls to respond to, so sometimes it's easier just to schedule a call so we don't waste time playing phone tag. I also want to note another deadline for you to think about. On February 14th, the New York State Council on the Arts will open its grants portal, which means that anyone who's applying can technically start loading up their information. On February 14th, I am not at liberty to have anything more than bureaucratic conversations with you. I can answer very basic questions. Prior to that, up through February 13th, I can be more frank with you about whether your project fits the criteria, answer more in-depth questions. So if you really have questions you want to ask me, I encourage you to reach out to me by February 13th. But again, I always encourage folks to contact me at any time. Just be aware that after the 14th, I may be sending you to other resources like this webinar to get the feedback you need. I may not be able to provide that directly to you. This is following New York State procurement law, and I have to follow the state rules. So thank you so much for joining me today. I hope this was helpful. I wish you all the best of luck. I look forward to reading your application. Have a great day.